And by the way, showed up with a Sugar Bowl hat on with his neck brace. That to me was product placement there.
Well, and it looked like Bill Clinton, another native son and Hog fan, probably gave him that advice.
I did not have that intern on the back of my motorcycle.
You think if he's trying to decide between who to hire for PR, and if Clinton and Associates comes in, we know we're all in trouble. But Bob Petrino has left jobs in bad places, and I'm not knocking your next guest. I'm a huge fan, but so has Keith Olbermann, and he continues to get rehired.
Wow, look at you, Paul. Flamethrowing. Easy there. I'm trying to get Olbermann back, He just filed a lawsuit against the former vice president, all right?
Well, I know. That's why I mentioned Clinton.
All right. Hey, good to visit with you as always. Thank you, buddy.
Dan, my pleasure.
All right. Paul Feinbaum and Keith Olbermann will join us coming up. Somebody will always hire talent, and Keith is a classic example. You got talent, people will hire you. Bobby Petrino, people, and I'm not making the parallel there. Just saying that you bring baggage sometimes, and people go, well, why would you hire them? Well, they have talent. They do something different than a lot of other people do. I wouldn't put Petrino in KO's category as far as being unique, but with what he's done, and I think that 21-5, you keep your job. Keith Olbermann will join us. At least I hope he's still joining us. We'll talk about Ozzie Guillen, the ruling by the Marlins, and I will read you the exact quotes from Marge Schott, what she had to say about Hitler that cost her dearly. All of that coming up. Final half hour and your phone calls. Dan Patrick Show. We'll get to your phone calls coming up. Who should be more humiliated? That's our poll question today. It's been a serious topic today. Ozzie Guillen, Bobby Petrino, or Greg Williams? Update the poll results, and we'll bring in Keith Olbermann. McLovin?
Bobby Petrino running away with it.
All right. Keith Olbermann. How do I introduce you, K.O.?
Person who is not on the list.
How about just baseball fan?
Sure.
Ozzie Guillen was up there almost for an hour speaking in Spanish, and lightly contentious here, but 5-game suspension for him. I guess trying to understand the perspective of this and asking you, being a baseball historian, 5 games, does that resonate? What's that mean for his comments?
I don't think it's going to work. There's one huge anti-Castro group in South Florida that said if he's not fired, we're going to picket the Marlins every day till Castro dies. That's the level of seriousness. And there were people, I don't know what you were reading on Twitter, but there were people trying to get in to the news conference from the street, and people from the mayor's office showing up, and it's going to be a political football, and I think it's probably going to be more of a political football the more resonance Rick Tellender's story carries. You're aware of this, right?
Yeah, back in 2008, he made similar comments where he said he's the toughest guy he knows. He doesn't admire his philosophies, but he admires the man.
Yeah, I mean, any remark that this praises. You have to, the context of South Florida. That is a place that is filled with people who either fled or are the sons of those who fled or the survivors of those who drowned and were eaten by sharks trying to flee or were tortured or lost everything they had. Castro. And when you have now 2 sets of remarks spaced over 4 years, you're beginning to move into Marge Schott territory. And I'm a believer that people who aren't versed in politics and aren't versed in a community get a little leeway when they make a huge mistake. But I think 5 games is just it's not going to satisfy politicians who particularly obviously will jump on this with both feet and try to try to get reelected based on I stood up against Ozzie Guillen. That's the problem. He's now, I'm not protecting the politicians. I think those who do it are idiots and malefactors, but this is not going to go away at 5 games.
If you had an interview with him, what's the first question what's the question or questions you would be asking him that you'd want answers to?
In the context of what's happened now?
Yeah.
to what degree he does not associate himself with the Cuban American or the Cuban parts of the South Florida population. In other words, does he think himself in some way, because he's Venezuelan, not a part of that community? Has he never stepped into their shoes? In other words, trust me, the name Olbermann is not Spanish nor Cuban, but I've seen enough and I know enough people to try to empathize with that. There is, if you're living in Iowa, it may be very difficult to conceptualize that he's Castro, that is viewed in a context of being comparable to Hitler in South Florida and in many other places too, but particularly there. And that would be the thing I would want to know from Ozzie is why does he do that? And also, Ozzie has a tendency. He's done this before. He did this 2 years ago with the Arizona Papers, Please laws, where he was asked about whether or not he would manage the All-Star game in Arizona after they put in these laws that basically asked anybody who the police wanted to would have to provide documents proving they were American citizens. And this was directed largely at Hispanics, and people said, "Well, were you managing the All-Star game if you're going to be there?" And he went, "No, of course not." And a couple of days later, he said, "No, I probably would." And it's like, why do you even answer these questions?
Well, I think that there's no filter,
exactly.
and we've let him off the hook many times. That's Ozzie being Ozzie, but Ozzie being Ozzie in Chicago is different than Ozzie being Ozzie in South Florida. But if you're the commissioner,
yeah.
Do you let the Marlins deal with their own, or do you say, I need to do something to say to an entire fan base, not just in South Florida, that I won't stand for this?
I assume that the Marlins did not act in a vacuum and that this was already assented to by Major League Baseball. This isn't like or maybe it is like an NCAA avoidance, self-imposed death penalty kind of thing. I don't think Bud's finding this out for the first time at the press conference that there was going to be a 5-game suspension. So I assume he's all right with this, and I guess the backup plan would be that if it gets worse, then baseball would act. The comparisons with Marge Schott begin to get into play once you're not talking about a ball player. So I think probably the commissioner is hoping this is going to work, but he's the backup plan, I think.
I don't know how you feel because you've been in news and politics, but the fact in sports used to be a vacuum. It used to be where we cordoned off the rest of the world the best we could, and it was a chance to escape. Now our social issues they're tied to sports.
Well, I'll contest that for a second in two ways. Number one being that neither of these interviews began with, "What do you think of Fidel Castro?" which would be like walking up to anybody on the street and asking them that, or going to, if you're interviewing Heidi Klum, would that be your first question to her? What do you think of Fidel Castro? I don't think that to this day, I don't think that happens very frequently. So I don't know that line is crossed. He brings Castro's name into it. That's a little different.
But we're discussing it is the point.
But look, in 1938, there was an outfielder with the New York Yankees named Jake Powell. And remember what America looked like in 1938. Segregated, borderline in the South, apartheid. I mean, serious segregation that we can't really conceive of anymore. The New York Yankees were in the Bronx, adjoining several very large African-American communities. And Jake Powell told a reporter, a radio interviewer, that what he liked to do during the off-season was go home to, I guess, Illinois, or maybe it was Missouri, where he was a cop in the off-season, and he liked to bash the skulls of a group identified with an N-word. The Yankees, 1938, walked him around from bar to bar in Harlem so he could apologize to groups of fans, presumably, but African Americans of nearly 80 years ago, in person. So this is not unprecedented, and it's not something exclusive to our era. What is exclusive to our era is the instant communication that everybody knows about that immediately.
Well, what I like is that we do talk about race, we do talk about religion, we're talking about and exposing people to Fidel Castro, whereas normally that wouldn't. I think we're nervous about doing that. That's why I'm saying the forum that we have in sports, we've almost. The lines are blurred now. We do talk about these issues, and I think it's a good thing to talk about these issues.
Well, we've talked about this many times, that the sports, and my conviction in being almost exclusively in news for the last 8 years, my conviction has never been stronger than this. Sports is well ahead of the rest of society in terms of dressing issues like this, well ahead of it, except for one complaint that I have in people's reactions to this. This is not a First Amendment issue.
I know.
Just to clarify it, just Google it. It's 2 sentences. The First Amendment just says the government can't stop you from saying something like that.
He couldn't say it to Fidel Castro. He couldn't say it in Cuba. If he was saying something negative, he would disappear.
Right.
He has freedom of speech here, but
his employers do have the right to suspend him for saying something that costs them money, as they do you and I, probably me. But based on past experience, probably me. But that's just the way it is. So if you want to argue against that this is unfair, he should have the right to say what he does. Go ahead and say that. Just don't invoke the First Amendment, because that's not true, and it's not your First Amendment right to be wrong about the First Amendment.
Are you headed back to sports? Or are you going to do news again? What are you going to do?
Right now, this conversation that we're having here, this is my current job. If you have an opening, I'll be happy to apply.
I don't think you need to say current job. You already had the current job.
Thank you very much. My non-NBC job. It's less than a week and a half. I've been too busy meeting with all the lawyers.
But you're taking on the former vice president. Not many people get to sue the former vice president of the United States.
I believe there's more than one suit going against this company at the moment. So I don't want to. Obviously, I can't go into great detail, but I don't think that's necessarily true. So
more suits in your closet or lawsuits?
No, more suits. I'm a better dressed man than when we worked together in Bristol. And please don't ask me anything about Castro.
I won't. 20 years ago, a couple of days ago, our first
20 years ago last Thursday.
Yep.
That was fun. I mean, both 20 years ago last Thursday and last Thursday.
Yeah, it was. And I think looking back on it, it was just fun to reminisce of what it was at a time when the culture was different, certainly at ESPN, and we got away with murder.
Yes,
we did. We got away with murder, and I have you to blame.
Well, I have you to blame for I don't want to get a fulsome with you here, but that was one of the nicest things anybody ever said about me last Thursday when you described me as a good teammate. And I saw 4 or 5 people in the back row fall over, fainting.
That was ESPN management.
That's right.
There.
The public relations guys. I didn't know they were there till we were gone. I
didn't
get to say hi.
That was Big Brother. Big brother.
Well, I would have said hi. I know you said hi.
I did. Yeah. I said, tell all my friends up there and the people that I don't like, hello. And hello.
All right. People. I think people know that it's not everybody. There's no dispute with everybody. It's organizational and historic. It doesn't apply to shaking people's hands or hanging out with them. So.
Well, it's good to visit with you. I'll take you up on an offer to go see a baseball game as well. And if you're bored.
Yes.
When you're bored.
I'd say give it another week.
Okay. All right. We'll check back in with you. I'm sure there'll be something. Ozzie may have said something stupid next week, too.
When does he come back?
In five games.
And now I'd like to talk about Ahmadinejad.
Thank you, bud.
All right, Dan.
All right. That's Keith Olbermann. Yeah, people are always surprised when I say that, because no matter what your politics are or, your view of Keith with his show, and I've separated those. When I worked with him at ESPN, he was an unbelievable teammate. And by that I meant it wasn't about one-upmanship. It wasn't being better. It wasn't showing off. He would help you, and it was live TV. We were doing the 11 o'clock Eastern Sports Center. All the games end, and you have to have knowledge. You have to have that backdrop there. You can't say, we'll take a commercial break. If somebody gives you highlights and you have to read them, you have to know about these guys. And Keith was very, very generous in making sure that it was a great show. Not that he was great, that we were great, or at least good. And I meant that. He was the best teammate I ever had there. Now, not everybody felt that way, but I worked with him every single night. Were there particulars? Yes. Was he different? Yes. But when it came time to making TV, I'll go into battle with him anytime. Last call for phone calls. Poll question. We'll have the results, what we learned, what's in store tomorrow, all of that. We'll wrap that up. Dan Patrick Show.